Night on Sweetwater. Stop, don't look, breathes the dark. Torches hiss, the law is a match, the truth a newborn's steam. Hank thumbs a wooden button, O for Owen, and picks mercy over his roof. If you've got winter in your chest, ride with us till dawn. Wind came low across Sweetwater and made the barn boards talk. January worked its teeth on everything it could reach. Iron, leather, skin. Hank Mallory felt it in the splits across his right hand, each crack stinging like a match head. He kept a needle in a block of tallow, warmed it with his breath, and ran a new stitch through a rain strap that gave up that afternoon. The lamp threw a dull circle on the plank wall. Beyond it, the alleyway was dark, the kind of dark that sits down and stays. Love this tale? Hit like, share, and subscribe to keep the West wild. The horse in the near stall twitched an ear and blew steam. Hank rubbed him down with a wool square stiff with old sweat and sheep grease. The smell stayed in the air, tallow, hide, and a thread of cold coffee from the tin cup by the post. He liked that smell. It meant the place still held. He put the reins aside and flexed his hand. Blood welled in a line at the knuckle and cooled fast. He wiped it on his coat without looking. Outside, the wind pawed the eaves. Somewhere out on the flats, snow moved like a slow herd. No edge, no sound you could put a number on. He checked each latch along the stalls, set a palm to bellies, listened for cough. A rope creaked and settled. A mouse rattled a grain sack and thought better of it. Hank counted his breaths, long and even. He was good at even. It kept a man from thinking too hard. By the gray door the cottonwoods stood as shadows, their black ribs against a paler black. Uphill from them a small hump of ground showed where the snow had drifted thin. The wind scraped at it but couldn't quite take it level. Hank's eyes rested there and didn't blink for a time. He did not go out at night anymore, not up that way. Daytimes were enough. He reached to the chest nail where he hung his coat and touched the pocket. The wooden button sat where it always sat, cut crooked years ago with a dull knife, letter O dug rough as a cow brand. He rolled it under his thumb and felt the burrs. Hold now, he said, not much louder than the horse's breath. He could have meant the button. He could have meant the night. He took a pull of the coffee. It had gone slick and bitter. He swallowed it anyway. The lamp fluttered and then steadied, wick, low to save oil. He lowered it more. Winter eats money like a sick mule. Work kept his mind from the weak places. He cut a new thong from a scrap of rawhide and threaded it through a cinch ring. He greased the seam of a boot with tallow so the snow wouldn't climb in. He drove a peg back into a loose slat with the heel of his hand. Each act was small and honest. The barn took them in and gave back a kind of quiet that fit his bones. He sat on a hay bale back against the ladder rail, hat brim tipped. He let the old pain sit where it wanted. It made its round the way the wind made its round. Nothing to argue with. He could feel January inside him the way a man feels a storm in his bad knee. He thought of spring in a flat way, more work, more calves, a softer ground to bury fence posts in. He did not think past spring. The mind didn't need to throw rope that far. A shutter thumped and rode its hinge, then fell still. Hank's head turned a little, no hurry in it. He set the lamp glass down over the flame and pinched it lower with 2 fingers, quick and sure. Dark rose up from the corners, but not all the way. He was not a man to sit in full dark unless he had to. He listened. The wind had 1,000 tricks. It made a whistle where a nail-head stood proud. It found the gap under the sill and played it like a reed. It put a hand to the tin and shook it once, testing. He knew those voices. These were his neighbors. They had lived here long as he had. The horse stamped once and then was quiet. Hank looked at the line of its back. the way steam made a white push over the withers and broke apart near the rafters. He set his palm flat on the hay and felt the cold come through the bale. He thought without words of where the cold did not reach. Inside a coat pocket, against a round of wood with an O scratched on it. In a boy's laugh he hadn't heard in 3 winters. "Cold bites meaner'n a bad dog," he said, just to hear a voice. His voice. He leaned his head back and let his eyes close halfway. The barn breathed with him. The place knew his weight, his steps, his silences. A man could live a whole winter inside such knowing. He had, and he meant to again. Keep the stock, keep the roof, keep the quiet. That was the work. That was enough. The wind shouldered the door once more, heavier this time, and a fine dust of snow pushed through the crack along the sill. It drifted at his boots like flour. Hank brushed it aside with the edge of his heel and set the lamp even lower, a coin of flame under glass. Nothing to it but weather, he told himself. Weather and the night. He was wrong, but he did not know that yet. It came like a burr under the skin of the night. Small, mean, impossible to ignore. Stop. Don't look. Hank's eyes opened all the way. The words weren't to memory, and they weren't to wind. They had breath on them. He didn't move at first. He let the dark tell what it would. The lamp made a shallow saucer of light on the straw. Beyond it, shadows layered up like stacked hides. "Stop," the voice said again, thinned by cold and fear. "Don't look." He slid 2 fingers to the lamp wick and pinched it lower until the flame went to a coin. Then his right hand traveled the familiar road to the Colt on the post. Rested there, didn't draw. He wasn't hunting trouble. He just wanted to know where it aimed from. "Ma'am," he said, calm as a fence post. "Barn ain't a church hideout." Something shifted in the dark between the feed sacks and the stall wall, a narrow shape hunkered low. The straw there had a scatter to it that wasn't there an hour ago. He caught a smell that didn't belong to horse or tallow. Wet wool, scared sweat, a seam of road dust gone to paste. A woman rose out of that corner a hand's breadth, not full, just enough for her face to catch a sip of the light. She had the pinched look cold puts on a person, cheeks wind-burned raw under streaks of melt, hair stuck in strings to her temples. Her dress was mended in careful squares that did not match. She held a bundle to her chest so tight her knuckles had gone white and shiny. The bundle shaped itself against her like a live thing. "Please," she said. The word scraped. "Don't look. If you do, you'll turn me out." Hank kept his palm on the Colt and his eyes on her hands. The rest of a person lies, but hands don't. Those were cracked and swollen like his own, the cracks rubbed full of grit. Not a drifter's hands, a worker's. "Nobody's turning anybody just yet," he told her. "You're on cattle ground. If you brought wolves, say so plain, no wolves." She shifted to put more board between him and the bundle. "Just," she swallowed, winced. "Just me." The horse in the near stall lifted its head and blew, uneasy without knowing why. Snow hissed along the sill and traced a faint white line at Hank's boots. He lifted the lamp a little, just enough. The woman flinched from it. "Name?" he asked. She didn't give it. Her eyes went quick to the door and back. Trapped rabbit quick. The bundle quivered once, small, then settled. She tightened her hold until the cloth creaked. "I don't want to see what's under there," Hank said. It came out true and surprised him some. "Not unless I need to." "You don't," she said so fast it tripped. "You don't need to." "Please." He looked past her into the reach of dark. If she'd come in one of the big gaps between gusts, he hadn't heard the latch. He tried the night with his ears again. No hoof yet, no dog, no man talk. Just the wind chewing on the tin and the barn answering in sore wood. "You pick a poor place to hide," he said, voice low. "I don't take to company." I picked warm, she said, a kind of defiance skidding under the fear, and a roof. He weighed that and found it honest. He eased the lamp half an inch lower, let the light go soft again. Her shoulders sank a finger's width. That bundle, he said, ain't a rifle. No, her throat worked. Sir, don't look. It's not, it's not something you can send back once you see it. His thumb found the wooden button in his pocket without him telling it to. He rolled the rough O and felt the burr bite. You bring the law, he asked. That's what's following me. Law smells like turpentine and sermons, Hank said. What I smell is road and trouble. She took that, held it like a person might hold hot iron, not ready to throw or keep. Please, she said again, softer. If you look, you'll choose, and if you choose, you'll send me into it. He heard the truth of that and didn't like the shape of the choice forming. A man who kept to his fences could go a winter without choosing more than which cow to pull a calf from and which post to set deeper. He had been aiming at that kind of winter and no other. Step out from that corner, he said. Slow. She came a little into the saucer of light, enough he could see how blue cold had made her lips, how the cloth of the bundle showed damp at one edge, where breath, or something like it, had warmed and wet it. Her boots were split along the toes and wrapped with twine. Ice winked in the twine like seed pearls. Whew, she said, almost to herself, like she had to remember being named. Ruth Ann Kepler. Mallory, he said. Hank. Her eyes flicked to the colt and back. Mr. Mallory, if you're merciful, don't look. The word sat strange in the barn, merciful, like a stranger at breakfast. He let it hang there. He let the wind walk the walls and the horse blow and settle. He let his hand ease off the colt, slow enough not to wake whatever lived in the bundle, quick enough to tell her he meant what he said a moment ago. Nobody's turning anybody, he repeated. Not yet. A length of straw ticked down the face of the lamp glass, scorched and curled. Hank lifted the lamp, felt how light it had gotten, judged how long it could carry. Not long. Oil was a winter count, same as cordwood and oats. He looked at Ruth Ann Kepler, at the bundle that moved like a heartbeat, at the corner where Dark had built a den for her. Cold's comin' meaner, he said. If you're stayin' past 3 breaths, you'll freeze in place. Slide over by that hay wagon, off the draft. She hesitated, then obeyed, crab slow, guarding the bundle with her body, as if a look could bruise it. Hank watched the way her feet placed. No limp, no drink, just a person run to the edge and still running. Don't look, she said again as she passed the lamp. She turned the bundle away from him like a mother or a thief. I heard you, Hank said. He set the lamp down low on the wagon axle. He didn't snuff it, not yet. He wasn't ready for full dark. He wasn't ready for what it would ask. Hank moved the lamp with 2 fingers, slid it down to the wagon axle where the draft didn't get at it. Off that seam, he told her. Wind walks right through it. He pointed with his chin, not his hand. Ruth shuffled as ordered, guarding the bundle like it could bruise on a look. The straw whispered under her boots. Her breath came short, white as flour dust, and broke against the dark. He took a horse blanket from the rail, a wool, and sighing matted with grease in the clean rank of animal. He shook it once, soft, so it wouldn't slap. Here. He didn't step close enough to see into her arms. He held the blanket out in the half-light and let her come the rest of the way. Her fingers touched the edge and jerked back, then took it. She wrapped it arm around her and the bundle both, turning her body to keep the cloth between him and whatever lay inside. Sit, he said. He nudged a bale with his boot, dragged it with a rasp and settled it against the wagon's shadow so the wind lost its teeth. She lowered herself slow. The bundle shifted, a small weight finding a smaller hollow. The sound it made, no more than a hush, ran a wire through Hank, tight as fence. He felt the pull and braced against it. He kept busy. He liked busy. He slid the lamp glass up and took the flame between thumb and forefinger, quick. It went to a pin, then out. A smoke thread climbed, then flattened, and was gone. Dark rose to the rafters and down the walls till the barn was only shape. The cut of a stall post, the gray of an empty pail, the square of the door like night, inside night. "Better," he said, voice made of cloth. "Torches see worse when a place ain't showing off." She said nothing. He could hear her swallow. The horse in the near stall shifted a hind foot. The iron shoe ticked a plank, then stood square again. The barn settled into the old rhythm, rope, stretch, wood groan, breath, breath. "How far'd you run?" Hank kept his voice low so it didn't carry through the cracks. "Since sundown," she said. "Cut through the willows." "Lost a boot mid-creek. Tied it with twine." She breathed once. "Careful. I didn't stop." "Eat?" She hesitated like the word itself might cost. "Yesterday." He took the tin cup, found it by feel, and set it on the stove plate that held the last of the day's heat. "Ain't much left worth warming," he said, "but it'll take the edge off your teeth." He waited while the cup remembered heat, then brought it to where her hand could find it. His knuckles brushed wool and grease and the faint sweetness of wet linen. He pulled back quick, humming out his fingertips like he'd touched a fence wire. "Thank you," she said. He didn't answer. His hand had gone to his pocket without permission. The wooden button was there. He rolled it. He let the rough O scrape his thumb, because that scrape told him where he was and what mattered. 3 winters hadn't rubbed it smooth. He didn't want them to. The dark pressed soft against them. It had weight. He listened the way a man listens when it's his ground and his roof and he means to keep both. Wind sorted itself along the eaves. A nail sang a high, thin note and quit. Somewhere up high, a pigeon that stayed too late shifted in its sleep and cooed once, puzzled. He counted the spaces between sounds. He had done that all winter, and the winter before, make a ledger of silence and mark the debts when they came due. Ruth's teeth clicked once against the tin. She stopped them. "I'm sorry," she whispered, and he wasn't sure if she meant the sound or the being here. "Ain't my church," he said. "Ain't my courtroom. Just my barn." He breathed through his nose, slow. "I won't be looking unless I got to." "That suit you?" Yes, a scrape of relief lived inside the word. "You got law on you, or men that call themselves that." Men. The way she said it held more cold than the night. They talk law when it gets them what they want. He said nothing. He knew that kind. He'd shoed their mounts and watched them bless the scorch they left. The bundle stirred. Not much. Enough to catch his breath and hold it. He felt his body step toward it without moving at all. In his head there was steam on a window, a handprint small and fog-soft, a kettle that never boiled as fast as a fever climbed. He saw a boy's mouth shaping his name with no sound in it. He felt the old ache stand and walk. "Easy," he told something that wasn't the night. "You a praying man, Mr. Mallory?" Ruth asked. The question surprised them both. "Not out loud?" He let the button dig his thumb. "Not where anybody'd hear." She made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had more weight on it. "Me neither." He reached to the shelf and found a strip of jerky by the feel and put it near her knee. "Work it slow," he said. "Dry'll crack your lips if you rush it." He set a second strip by the bale and left it there, in case his own mouth forgot what to do. Snow sifted under the door in a thin sheet. It found the seam where he'd meant to set a new plank come spring, and laid itself down as if making a claim. He brushed it with his boot again and left a wet crescent on the dirt. The cold came up through the floor and into his bones like an old debt collecting. "Where you think you're going if you make the road?" he asked. "North," she said. Cottonwoods. I heard there's a trapper up that way, takes in strays for coffee and a day's peace. Old Ike, Hank said, and felt the name lift a corner of the dark. He'll feed a man just to hear a different lie than his own. I don't lie good, she said. That a blessing or a handicap depends who's listening. She drew the blanket tight. The bundle pressed back, small heat that's against cold wool. I won't cause you trouble, she said. Not more than I already did. Trouble don't knock, Hank said. It uses the back gate. They let it sit. The barn breathed, and he breathed with it. He could have slept like that another hour, maybe two, with the world narrowed to wood and hide and wet wool and the rasp of someone else staying alive. He could have, but the wind shifted. It came out of the south now, thin and straight, and it carried a different sound under it. Not a sound you'd put a name to yet. Just an iron taste on the air, like bit metal held too long against a tongue. The mare put her ears north and stayed that way. Hank lifted his head a fraction. He lay his palm on the floor and felt for tremble. Nothing yet, but the ledger had turned a page. He could feel that, without hearing a thing. Drink up, he said, soft. Cold's got more to say before we're done with it. He set the empty lamp where his hand could find it quick if fire was needed, and where his hand could find it quicker if fire was the wrong answer. Ruth's breath smoothed. The bundle made no sound at all. Hank let the wooden button sit warm against his palm till the warmth left it, then closed his fist around it and waited for the night to speak plain. The sound came clean now, iron on crust, hooves shouldering through drift, not hurrying. Men who weren't afraid of the dark. The mare's ears stayed north. Hank rose, felt the cold pour off the floorboards, and set his palm flat to hush her. Ruth's breath thinned behind the hay wagon. The bundle kept its small heat, like a coal under ash. Stay put, he said, a barn quiet thread. He found the latch by feel and slid the crossbar up just enough to see a sliver of yard. Night lay white and wide. Snow went sideways in the wind. Out of it moaned 3 torches, low orange mouths spitting at the weather, and a 4th carried higher by a man who liked to be seen. Clayton Rusk drew even with the door and sat his horse square, slicker flapping like black tin. The torch made a cage of light around his face. Dry eyes, knife smile, jaw that had made too many decisions and liked it. Mac Furlong rode off his knee with the hounds, blue and sable, straining a leather lead, throats up and quivering. A 3rd man held back with the extra horses, a quiet hand, with the look of someone who sold his nights one at a time. Mallory, Rusk called, voice carrying easy, like he was asking for salt at table. Evening to you. Hank slid the door a finger wider, not enough to offer a target. Evening. You seen a woman go this way? Rusk tipped the torch. Snow hissed along its edge and died, then flared back meaner. Took what ain't hers. We're collectin'. Hank let the wind talk before he did. Only thing thievin' here is the cold. Mac leaned, peering over the torchlight. Tracks say different. She cut the road below the willows and lost a boot. You can trace twine in this crust. He grinned with half his mouth. Dogs nearly got religion off. It blew and Sable shivered, their noses sawing the air. One gave a small, throttled bark. Ruth's hands twitched against the blanket. The bundle hushed like it knew. Rusk smiled in a way that didn't rise to his eyes. Now, Hank, I'm obliged. I fly paper for the range now. Keep peace. Keep property straight. Folks like it when a thing's owned. Proper paper don't warm a calf, Hank said, nor a man. Paper keeps a widow from losing her land to vagrants. He let the torch sag toward the barn wall. Heat kissed plank. Paper keeps the likes of Kepler from poisoning a town with a dead man's blood. The name slid under the door like a draft. Ruth drew in air that scraped. Hank kept his breath even. You got sermons and fire, Peggy said. Seems overmuch for one woman short a boot. Rusk shrugged. She ain't alone. He cocked his head toward the hounds. Blood runs in bunches. You know it. The father met his rope 'cause he earned it. We ain't lettin' the spawn carry his stripe into the world. That's law enough for a cold night. Hank felt the wooden button in his pocket go hard as a pebble. Law enough for you, he said. Toby Finch's shadow lifted at the loft ladder, all elbows and worry. Hank cut him a look that said down and still. The boy froze, mouth shut, on a question he'd carry to spring. Tell you what. Rusk turned the torch sideways so the flame licked long and thin. You open up and let us put eyes to corners. We're gone in 10 minutes. You hold shut on us. He eased the torch forward till pitch popped and threw a black spark. And I cure this barn of its creak. Fire sets things straight. Behind Hank, the horse snorted, stamped once. The boards carried the stamp like a drum. In the wagon's shadow, Ruth tucked her chin and pressed the bundle tighter. He could feel her choice pulling at his like a team on a narrow bridge. Evening's poor for visitors, Hank said. You can turn your law by day like honest men. Rusk laughed, short. Days for decent folks, nights when we find what skitters. He leaned, squinting at the crack. You take in strays now, Valerie. I remember you as a man kept to his own fences. I keep to 'em fine. Then you won't mind me looking along, Rusk nodded at Mac. The hounds went tight, paws dancing. Or I can write this place down a loss and call it fair to the sheet. Hank slid the door another inch and set his shoulder to it like a lazy man might, which he wasn't. The Colt lay warm at his hip. He didn't draw. He let his voice do the drawing. Place never stood on fear, he said. Not when wind came harder than this. The smile left Rusk. This ain't wind. He brought the torch head to the doorframe and pressed. Sap hissed in the grain and cried a little. A curl of smoke slid under and went sweet in Hank's nose. Pine and old summer. He hated the way it smelled. Good. Mac shifted the lead hand to hand, eyes busy. There's sign in your yard, Hank. 2 sets, 1 light, 1 lighter. You want your roof, hand 'em out. I ain't saying it twice. From the loft, Toby breathed too loud. Hank said without turning, Easy, boy. Then to the dark under his own hat brim, Rusk, you set a brand to my door, and you'll see what kind of winter a man can make for you. Rusk cocked his head, listening to how quiet Hank said it. There he is, he murmured. Old stock shows a horn. He lifted the torch, changed minds. You think I don't know what you got in there? I know the Kepler mess, end to end. Man swings for murder, leaves behind a curse. Better to snuff it clean, saves you long grief. Snow came in a hard sweep and bent the torch flame flat. It guttered, then climbed back stubborn. Rusk's patience climbed with it. He gave a nod to the third rider, who slid his rifle out from under his slicker and set it easy across the saddle horn. Last word, Rusk said. Open up, let me in polite. Barn lives. Keep on with your shut mouth. Barn burns, and I take what's left out of the ashes. Paper'll forgive me by noon. Wind rattled the hinges, and the door tried to lift on its pins. Hank set both hands to it and felt the strain like a living thing. Behind him, Ruth whispered one word, mercy, and it moved through him the way hot coffee moves through a man frozen from the outside in. He set his jaw. Torch off my boards, he said. We'll talk like men, not moths. Rusk eased the torch back an inch, as if to be courteous, then let the heat creep up again until sap in the frame whined. You don't set the terms, Mallory. I do. I'm the paper on this range. Paper don't mend fence, Hank said. Move that, fire. Mac chuckled low. Hear that? Old boy thinks wind is his only neighbor, Ruth breathed once behind the wagon, a small catch in it. Hank felt the barn's weight dump weight on his shoulders, the hay put up tight, the bridles he'd kept whole through 3 winters, the horses that knew his hands. A man could lose a house and build again. A burned barn took seasons to straighten. Rusk rolled his wrist, pitch popped, and sent a black spark onto the drift. It hissed and died. I'll be plain. Kepler's widow ran with what ain't hers. There's a sickness bundled up with her, and I won't have it spread. You open, we look, we leave the place standin'. You hold fast. I mark you down as accomplice and cure this barn of its creak. Either way, I finish my job. Your job's your own say-so. Hank let the door ride against his shoulder, easy. This place didn't get built on fear. Everything builds on fear, Rusk said, pleasant as a storekeeper. Law, too. Fear of the rope keeps men decent. Decent men don't need rope. Mac leaned where the torch could paint Hank's hat brim. You got a boy up there? His eyes cut toward the loft. Old wheat straw tells tales. 2 sets of boots, 1 man, 1 not quite. Toby froze so hard Hank could hear the freeze. Empty, Hank said, flat. You read too much into squeaks. Rusk let the torch lift. I'll count it out then. 1. You open polite and show me corners. 2. I push in and look myself. 3. Mac fetches a brand and we don't have to argue with planks. Snow thickened, driving fast and straight. The torch burned, guttered and mean, spitting resin. Horses at their hind feet and worked their jaws in the bits. The hounds trembled with wanting, nails picking at the crust. Hank put his palm to the door again, and felt the old pine answer back, warm from the torch, cold everywhere else. He could taste the pitch on the air, summer trapped in a stick, asking to be let out. He thought of leather, grain, tools, winter salt. He thought how quick fire makes a man child poor. Count if it comforts you, he said. 1. Rusk smiled with his eyes dead. Some men know when to be practical. Behind Hank the bundle shifted and then went still, a quiet that pulled at him harder than any noise. He did not turn. He kept his eyes where they needed to be. 2, Rusk said. Hank slid his thumb into his pocket and closed over the wooden button. He felt each burr and notch, the crooked O cut bad with a dull knife by hands that had not learned yet to be careful. He could smell soap on a summer shirt and hear a laugh that had bounced off these same boards, the fear that rose in him. Wasn't for lumber. It was for the one thing a man can't fix if he breaks it. His own soul. He let go the button. He set his other palm on the door and planted his boots. 3, Rusk finished, satisfied. He tipped his head at the third rider. The rifle came out across the saddle like a polite suggestion turned rude. Last offer, Rusk said, and lowered the torch till the flame kissed the grain again. Smoke walked under the crack. 10 minutes, friendly-like. Hank lifted his voice a little, enough to bounce in the yard and be heard down the line. You bring that brand a hair closer, Clay, and you'll find out how friendly I ain't. Mac's smile corner turned. Hear that tone? He's hidin' her. The hounds clawed for the seam. Mac let the lead out a foot. Blue's nose hit the sill, and he sang a thin, silver note that set Ruth's teeth on edge. Hank felt her flinch through the boards. You came to steal a look, Hank said. I ain't sellin'. Rusk's grin flattened. Fine. He shoved the torch head hard into the jam. The wood took the heat and answered with that sweet cry Hank hated. You got yourself a burnable sermon, then. Hank took his weight off the door, a hair's width, enough to make Rusk lean in to keep it. The torch head slid a half-inch deeper in the seam. Hank slammed the bar down. The door jumped in the track and bit the torch iron. Flame burped, snuffed low, then sputtered back crooked. Rusk jerked his hand clear, cussing neat and quiet, more insult than heat. "You'll regret that courtesy," he said. "Maybe," Hank said. Rusk sat back and let the torch breathe. "We'll circle the house. If she ain't in your barn, she's in your kitchen. Mac, take the north side. Pike, hold the corral. If he lights a lamp, put it out. If he opens, don't let him close it. If he shoots, shoot back. I'll fetch the rest of the paper from town and hang it round his neck by noon." "That paper heavy?" Hank asked. "You'll need a strong nail." Rusk laughed once, no joy in it. "Noon, Mallory. That's charity. Storm'll slow me. Use the time to think on your priorities." He lifted the torch and crushed the flare down into the drift till it hissed and died. Dark sucked the yard back into itself. Only the horse breaths and the jingle of bit chains moved. The men peeled off, hooves crunching. One set went wide along the fence. Another drifted by the kitchenelle, quiet as a thief. The hounds whined and worked their noses in half circles, taking the night in like a map. Hank shut the door to the seam and dropped the bar. He did not light the lamp. He stood with his back to the wood and let the cold soak through his coat and into his shirt. Ruth's whisper came from the wagon's shadow, thin as silk. "Don't open," she said. "Please. I ain't." He turned, let his eyes find where she was, without sight. "They'll be back with more men and a reason written neat. We got minutes, and we'll spend 'em right." He felt her nod more than saw it. The bundle lay quiet again, a coal under wool. "Boy," Hank said up to the loft, barely sound. "Breathe through your nose. We'll move when the wind talks louder than boots." Toby's answer was a ghost of air. "Yes, sir." Hank slid a hand to the shelf, found the Spencer oil can by touch, and set it ready. He rolled the wooden button once more under his thumb and put it back. Then he leaned into the dark like a man setting his shoulder to a plow and chose what side of himself he meant to keep. The yard went quiet in the way trouble does when it crouches. Hoof crunch faded along the house side. A bit chain ticked, then nothing. The wind came back into its place, talking low through the eaves. Hank stood with his back on the door until the wood quit humming, then eased away. Ruth was a darker piece of dark by the hay wagon, the blanket hunched high. He could hear her working air slow and careful through her nose, the way a person does when pain's near, and you don't want it to smell you. "We ain't got long," he said. "If there's a truth I need, say it now." She swallowed. The sound was small. "Truth don't help men like that," she whispered. "Helps me," Hank said. She held still another breath. Then she uncurled the blanket a hand's width. Cloth rasped. A second layer came loose, fameuse under her fingers. The kind of swaddling done in a hurry with what you have. Shirt tail, old skirt hem, a strip of flour sack that still carried a ghost of blue letters. Warmth ran out, like a secret. It found Hank's knuckles first. He did not bend. He let the dark tell him shape. A tiny hand slid free, palm pale as tallow, fingers curled loose and noble like they owned the air they touched. On the wrist, just above the crease, lay a wine-colored patch the shape of a bean. It looked like something the world had laid there by mistake and forgot to take back. Ruth pulled the cloth up quick, as if the night could bruise what it saw. But the one look had done its work. The hand had been small once in this barn, too. The O in his pocket burned under his thumb. "Not a sickness," she said, fierce and low. "Don't let him call it that." "Don't let him call him that." "What do they call him?" Hank asked. "Payment," she said. The word came up hard. "Debt with legs." He let that sit. He reached without thinking and adjusted the edge of the blanket so it nested better against the draft. His finger brushed a roundness under the fold. Belly, breathing. The heat of it shot up his arm, and he took his hand away fast, as if he'd done wrong. "They hang his father," Ruth said. said he killed a man in a ditch fight behind the freight car office. The man that died was clay in Rusk's hand. Paper signer, deed putter. The true quarrel was over landlines and a spring head. My man, her voice broke and didn't come together right away. He was a mouthy fool some days, but he wasn't a killer. He stood up in daylight to a thing done in dark. That's all. The rope answered him. Hank kept his words plain. No weight a person had to carry besides their own. Rope and sermon. She let go a thin laugh that wasn't. Rusk called it peace, said the law was a fence and fences keep lambs safe. Then he sent men to pick up what was left. Me, the baby, said no town needs a murder and blood-sucking milk. Said better to snuff sorrow young than teach it to run. The mare in the near stall put her nose down and blew into her bedding, like she could push the talk away. Hank looked at the door and saw in his head Rusk's torch steam with snow and then flare back. He could smell the pine pitch again, sweet as wrong. You ran, he said. I ran, she answered. I cut through willow and water. I lost the boot. I kept the child. Hank nodded. The nod had weight. He reached his pocket and closed over the wooden button. The old burrs were a map of a boy's morning. The O raised hard against his thumb felt like a brand pressed from inside. A man can walk around a hole all winter and call it a snowdrift. Tonight the edge had given. What's he called? He asked. The words careful, like they were stepping on thin ice. She took too long to answer, so he knew she had named him Quiet to herself, to keep the world from taking it. When she said it, the name didn't so much sound as arrive. Owen. The barn changed shape around that. The stall post stood closer. The rafters came down a finger. Hank heard himself breathe in and hold. He felt the button push back, that rough O against his thumb bone, and he did not let it go. Wind slipped a knife under the sill, and the knife had teeth. Ruth must have felt the change in him. If you send me out, she said, steady now, don't say the name when you do. Don't lay it down for them. Keep it for a decent place. Hank's jaw worked. He looked at the line of snow along the door seam, thin as flour, at the way the cold came up through the floor, into his boots, and made his feet dumb. He smelled tallow, wet wool, old straw, the iron ghost of gun oil from the Spencer can he'd set ready. These were the things a man knows. He added one more to them. Blood don't hand down sin, he said. Not in my barn. The words sat there, and he found he could sit with them. They didn't ask him a price he hadn't already paid. He turned his head toward the north wall, toward where the land fell away. There's a creek down behind the cottonwoods, he said. Sweetwater runs warmer under a skin of ice. She don't like to show herself in January, but she moves. Water takes tracks and feeds it to country that don't keep score. You ride the bed and step on stone, you'll be gone while they're still sniffing fence posts. Ruth pulled the blanket tighter around the bundle. I can't outrun hounds. You can. Outthink men running hounds in a storm, he said. They get brave with a rope in their pocket, but wine taxes courage. We go by the little gate and keep low along the dry ditch till it cuts the creek. There's a place under the sycamore root where ice don't hold. Step the horse, if you feel it go, let it break quiet. Don't fight it loud. Let the water take you to the bend where the reeds stand dead. After that, it's cottonwoods and a rag of smoke if you get lucky. Old Ike keeps a tent under the lee. He'll open his flap for a lie he ain't heard, and he ain't heard yours. She lifted her face into the dark like a person might lift it, towards sun they couldn't see. Why would you help me? Hank didn't answer the why. He set his hand flat on the blanket, where heat moved, a touch steady as a prayer and shorter. The bundle went easy under it, the tiny weight standing, his breath still. He took his hand back and found the Spencer's oil by feel and made the old action slick. Because a barn is for keepin' life through winter, he said, and surprised himself with the truth of it. Not for holdin' fire. He looked up toward the loft. Toby, he breathed. Yes, sir, came down like thistledown. You're gonna ride Juniper and drag a sack south. Slow first, then noisy. Circle while you can. When you hear 'em bite, you cut east and lay dog to the ridge. Don't be proud. If they press you, throw the sack and your hat, and let 'em bay the hat. I'll pull their eyes back this way. Yes, Mr. Hank. Hank slid the Spencer's lever once, soft, and felt all the winters between this one and the last time he'd done it. He put the oil can back and set his palm to the door. When I open and they look at me, you move, he told Ruth. Keep the blanket over his face, out of the wind. Breathe into the wool so he breathes warm air. Don't stop to think, don't look back. Ruth's hands tightened. I said that to you, she whispered. Don't look. He found his pocket and pressed the wooden button into the meat of his palm till it hurt. I looked enough, he said. More than enough. Outside, a hound put a question into the dark, and the other answered. Men murmured the way men do when they're making themselves brave by talking. Snow hissed under the door like sand. Hank set his shoulder. The barn breathed once more with him. Then he lifted the bar. Hank lifted the bar and let the door crack an inch, too. Wind muscled in, cold shouldering along the floor, bringing with it the smell of iron and pitch and wet horse. He set his boot heel to keep the door from clapping and spoke without turning his head. Toby? A shadow unwound from the loft ladder. The boy hit the dirt soft and sure, skinny as a fence slat, eyes big in the near dark. Juniper's saddled? Hank asked. Yes, sir. Cinch down 2 holes. Good. Hank reached to the peg and took up a burlap sack fat with hay chaff. He looped a rope through its neck and tossed the free end to the boy. Drag this, slow first, then loud when you're past the south draw. Make me a picture they can't stop looking at. Toby nodded, tongue caught at the corner of his mouth like it always did when he meant to do a thing right. I'll take the long gully, sir. Snow's hard there. If they press you, throw the sack in your hat and let 'em bay the hat, Hank said. You hear me? Loud as a bell. The boy's grin showed white and quick, and then was gone. He ghosted for the side door, eased the latch, and slipped into the yard. A breath later came the dry jingle of bit chains and the small, steady sound of a good horse thinking about its feet. Hank turned back to the wagon shadow. Ruth's eyes were in the dark. 2 coals banked up and in tight. He pulled a strip of sheepskin from a nail by the stall, old, greasy, warm with the life it had kept, and knelt. He didn't let himself look past wool and tied twine. Lift him, he said. Her hands obeyed before her fear could argue. Hank cupped the tiny feet through the blanket and found them cold as river stones. He wrapped the skin snug, heel to toe, working the knots quick and low, like he was shoeing a skittish colt. Grease from old tallow slicked his thumbs. The smell rose, sheep, lanolin, winter work, and for a beat the barn felt like it used to when a boy's laugh could live here. Hush now, he said to the bundle, not thinking. Little man's got wheels on him. The bundle stilled. Ruth's breath came all the way in for the first time since he'd seen her. Thank you, she said, the words shaped careful to keep from breaking. He stood and put the little gate key in her palm, cold brass on cold skin. We go now, he told her. Keep the blanket over his face some and breathe his air for him. Count your steps. Every 10, listen. If you don't hear nothing but wind, you're doing it right. What if I hear more? We coaxed. Then you listen harder, he said, and that was all a person could promise. He eased the big door wider till the night fit through. The yard lay white and low, broken only by the fence line and the black bones of cottonwoods beyond. Off south, a shape slid across the drift. Juniper's neck and Toby's hunched back, and the drag sack made a soft rasp that would write like a gospel-encrusted snow. Hank let the door open another hand width so the sound could carry. "Go," he whispered. Ruth slipped past him so close he could feel the cold leaving her. She kept the bundle tucked under her chin and her shoulders rolled to wall off the wind. She ducked along the barn's lee and found the little gate by touch. The key turned with a click, small as a pin. A slice of night opened into a narrower night, the dry ditch lying there like a black thread, sewn through white cloth. Hank watched her take the first 3 steps, careful and sure, boot edges biting down. He pressed 2 fingers to the door plank. The wood thrummed with distance, men talking low, a hound's question note, a horse pawing to keep blood in the legs. Farther off, Juniper's shoes cut a new rhythm across the crust. Steady, then louder as Toby put weight to the drag. "Good boy." Ruth paused at the corner and half turned. He shook his head once. "Don't." She faced north again and slid on, body small against the ditch wall. The blanket's edge fluttered and then lay still. Hank stepped out into the yard and gave himself to the open. The cold bit his face, clean and mean. He set his hat brim and walked toward the rock fence slow, as if he had all a night to waste. He wanted eyes on him. He wanted to be the story. From the house side, Mac's voice carried thin. "There he is. Yard side." "Hold him polite," Russ answered from somewhere Hank couldn't pin yet. "Let the boy rid 'em. Dogs are talking south." Hank put his boot on the bottom rail of the rock fence and leaned like a man counting stars. Snow squeaked under his heel, that dry January sound. He worked the Spencer's lever by feel and kept the rifle muzzle down against his leg. He did not point it yet. A pointed gun closes a door you may wish you'd left open. Down in the ditch, Ruth felt her way along the drifted edge with the side of her boot. The world narrowed to knee and toe, to the rasp of wool at her throat, to the small weight breathing under her chin. 10 steps. Listen, the wind spoke in long, even lines. She took 10 more, another. Listen. Far off, a horse blew and shuffled. Closer, the brittle tattle of willow twigs, telling each other the same old news. The ditch broke into a low crossing and dropped toward the creek. The land opened a little and the wind got teeth again. Ruth bent against it. At the lip of the cut she could hear water, under crust. A slow, patient talker. She followed the sound down till the black seam of Sweetwater showed under a skin of ice, a dark road where everything you lost might float by. She tested the ice edge with a boot heel. The ice gave a small cry and settled. She looked back without meaning to and saw the barn a smudge, the big door a darker mark, a man at the fence like a notch cut in the night. She didn't linger. She stepped where the willow roots sewed the bank together and felt the ice take her weight. With a grudging sigh, up in the yard, Hank took his hat off and wiped the brim with his sleeve in a nothing gesture men do when they want time to slide a little sideways. He let the wind comb his gray whiskers and did not look toward the ditch. Rusk came up quiet from the kitchen side like a fox that had learned doors. "You come to reason?" Rusk asked, friendly again. "I come to stand," Hank answered. "South draws talkin'." Rusk pointed with his chin into the dark where Toby's drag sack told its lie. "We'll look that way first and then come back for your explanation." "You go where your dogs tell you," Hank said. "Just keep your torch off my boards." Rusk smiled. "Easy. We'll leave light for later. Storm's light enough." He gave a small whistle. The hounds turned their heads south and took 2 tight steps, pulling the lead iron bright. "Hear that, boy? Sinner's trail, Hank." Let the smile die on Rusk's mouth. "Cold will take your pride past the first hill," he said. "Don't forget your manners on the way back." "Wouldn't dream of it." Rusk touched a glove to his hat brim, mock courteous, and swung into the saddle. Mac, Pike, South hoofbeats started up 3 sets, then 4 with the extra mount, and rose to a hard drum. The hounds' voices braided into them and pulled the whole noise like a teamet on a freight sled. It went past the barn and out into the south draw, where the gully stiffened and the wind made a clean sweep of everything a day tried to remember. Down at the creek, Ruth found the rotten seam Hank had promised under the sycamore root. Ice chipped and gave. She slid her boot through, and water jumped up her skirt like a thief, quick and sure. She choked a sound down and stepped again onto a flat stone slick as glass. The creek's talk came round her ankles, old and even. She breathed into the blanket so Owen breathed warm. "Hush," she whispered, and it wasn't a command so much as a wish. She took the line of stone slow, letting the water hide her feet, letting the skin of ice ride and crack where it needed. When it cracked loud, she stood still and let the sound finish instead of rushing against it. The reeds at the bend stood dead and rattling, gray spears in a gray world. Past them lay the cottonwoods and a piece of sky that would turn pink if the night ever gave up. In the yard, Hank slid the Spencer up to his shoulder and put a round into the sky, where it would break clean and say, "We're home and awake," without naming a man to bury. The shot made the night jump and told Rusk exactly what Hank wanted it to tell. "I'm here. Look at me. Bring it all back to my fence." Silence fell heavy after. Wind filled it. In that breathing space, Hank put his hat back on and touched his pocket once. Wood bit thumb. The O was rough and right. He turned toward the door, counting in his head the way a man counts when everything he loves is taller than he is. 10 for the ditch, 10 for the bend, 10 more to the cottonwood's black ribs. He could almost see Ruth stepping the count like a prayer. "Go on," he told the dark, and the dark went with her. The south draw took them first, hoofbeats slipping into the gully, dogs singing that bright rope of sound. Hank held still at the rock fence, counting his tens. Wind came off the flats, knife-thin. He could hear Toby's drag sack rasp a saint story into crust, steady as a catechism. Then the song changed. A hound lost faith mid-verse. Another bark snagged on doubt. Hank felt it before he heard Mac's voice float back, puzzled and mean. "Hey!" He's dragging hay. The pack milled and chopped the snow. You could hear claws scrabble at the crust, noses plowing shallow furrows that didn't satisfy. "Read it proper," Rusk said somewhere out in the white. "What's under the lie?" "Not much," Mac answered after a bit, a man disliking his own honesty. "Little feet, then water. Creek's eaten the rest?" Silence lifted its head, wind filled it, hooves turned. The hounds swung like a gate, their throats dropping a note, hungry again. The whole mess pivoted toward the yard, the way a herd finds the one weak post by smell. Hank let them come. He stood up straight on the fence rail, plain as a lantern on a cold shelf. He worked the Spencer's lever without hurry and kept the muzzle low, not to make a promise he couldn't keep. Snow tapped his hat brim and stuck there like salt. Rusk slid out of the storm first, slicker, shining, dull, horse's ears sharp as knives. Mac came off his quarter, the dogs tight and quivering, black strings in the white. Pike hung back, hands light on the reins, the kind of man who sells his night shift cheap and doesn't like returns. "There he stands," Rusk said, pleased. "A man who wants talk." "I want wind," Hank said. "You brought too much mouth for a winter night." Rusk's smile showed a wedge of teeth. "Dragon tricks don't last. Creek's a poor friend in January. She'll lie for a while, then she'll tell on you." "She's honest as you, then," Hank said. Mac eased the hounds forward. Their feet made a stutter of sound, claws chipping the crust. Blue nosed the fence post and sneezed. Sable turned his head and found the downwind of the barn, chest swelling on it. Mac's grin came back, thin as wire. "They're here somewhere, Clay." "Or were," Hank said. Rusk lifted a hand, and 2 torches winked to life behind him, sulky flames under falling snow. The wind pushed their heads sideways and made them spit. "Let's not hunt blind," he said, like a man offering a kindness he meant to charge for later. Hank lifted the Spencer to the sky and touched off a round. The shot went up and thudded into weather, a blunt sound that fell back on all of them at once. The torches flinched, the horses danced. Rusk's face went flat and practical. "That the talk you want?" he asked. "That's me telling you where to look," Hank said. "Here. Not south, not north. Here, why draw heat to yourself?" Rusk tilted his head. "You hedged something on the back side of that barn?" Hank didn't answer. He put the Spencer's muzzle on a fence post 3 inches right of Rusk's knee and shaved the ice off it with a second shot. Wood spat splinters. Rusk's mount set back hard and worked the bit, offended. The torches guttered with a hiss, fought to live, then lived meaner. Mac laughed once high. "He's stingy with answers, but liberal with noise." "You could call it that," Hank said. He settled the rifle into the nook of his shoulder and felt the old stock fit the old bone. The wind threaded his whiskers and stung the cracks in his knuckles. He could taste tallow and cold iron and the faraway dust of coffee from hours back. These were honest tastes. Rusk slid his rifle out, slow, no drama. "I don't kill men for barns," he said, and there was regret in it because it would have been easier if he did. "I kill 'em for choices." "You picked one, only one on offer," Hank said. The first bullet came from Pike, careful and left-handed. It took a plug of snow out of the rock fence and sprayed Hank's coat with grit and ice. He let the sting anchor him and sent a round low into the drift under Pike's horse. The animal crow-hopped, shocked, and Pike grabbed mane to keep his seat. "Easy now," Rusk said, not to Hank. "We ain't wasting lives on waste." Mac, lantern. "I want the edge of that barn red to the last nail." Mac kicked his gelding forward 3 steps, holding the torch high. Wind shouldered it and made it complain. The flame hissed like fat on a pan. Hank clocked the angles like he was measuring for a gate. If he cut Rusk, the pack would go mad. Ways some men go when you take their reason to swagger. If he let them sniff and circle, he bought Ruth more ground, but paid with his boards. He felt the wooden button in his pocket and curled his thumb over it. The rough O bit. He said a thing he'd only ever said to a boy once. "Easy, boy!" It settled something that had started to climb his throat. He breathed the way winter teaches, a long pull, then another. He put a round into the torch head. The ball took pitch and sent it to greasy sparks. Hiss. Dark fell hard on that corner. Snow rushed in to own it. Max swore and jerked back, the dogs shrilling at the sudden night. "Enough," Rusk snapped. "He's keeping us honest." He moved the rifle up and set it on Hank's middle with the cool of a butcher laying a knife. "Call her out," he said. "We're done with the pretties." Hank didn't blink. "Nobody calls anybody out of my barn," he said. "Gates for friends. Fires for fools." "You figure which one you are," Rusk's mouth thinned. "You play chivalry for a stranger, but you'll trade your roof for it." "That's fine by me. Paper forgives my methods if I get the names right." "You keep saying paper like it's a fresh Bible," Hank said. "All I see is ink on a lie." The hounds pulled to the corner. Blue put his nose under the bottom plank and dragged in sawdust tainted with warm wool. He brayed, a deep, sure sound that said he'd found the door of the truth, if not the truth itself. "South side," Mac said. "Back gate." Rusk's eyes lit in a way that had nothing clean in it. "There," he said, satisfied. He started his horse, meaning to slide along the barn's lee. Hank stepped off the fence rail and drew a bead on the spot of snow just ahead of Rusk's path. where ice polished over a shallow hole he knew from chores. He shot it open. The crust broke and folded. Rusk's mount checked, pawed, and danced sideways. The packs spilled into each other, banging shoulders, voices tangled. "You're writing yourself into a worse ending," Rusk said through his teeth. "I've been in the ending business a while," Hank said. "Never saw a good one written with a torch." Snow thickened again, coming slant. The torches sulked and hissed, more smoke than flame. Mac cursed the weather like it had cheated him in cards. Pike steadied his horse and found his sights again, patient and sour. Hank felt the night gather itself, the way a big cat bunches before it springs. He slid his thumb across the wooden button once more and let the burrs tell him where he'd been and what he'd keep. Down in the creek bend, a reed clicked against another reed, small, old music. He held it in his head like a lullaby. "Last ask," Rusk said. "Bring her out, and the barn lives till I can afford to hate you in daylight." "Barn's already lived," Hank said. "We're talking about people now." Rusk's face cooled. "Then we'll talk with bullets." "That's the only language you wrote down," Hank said, and set his cheek to the Spencer stock. The wood felt true and familiar, a thing a man could end with and not be ashamed. He let the breath go, slow. The night came closer to listen. Then the guns began to answer each other for real. Guns spoke the way weather does when it quits hinting. Pike cut first again, neat and left-handed. Hank answered low, shaving snow off a stirrup buckle to blind an eye. Mac's torch died hard with a spit. The dogs went to braid and howl. Rusk slid his horse half a body, and put a round past Hank's ear that slapped the post behind him like a wet hand. The Spencer kicked steady into Hank's shoulder, old wood finding old bone. He worked the lever and let the rifle run the way it remembered. Wind dragged smoke flat and sour. Splinters and ice made a fine grit in his teeth. He tasted iron and tallow and a memory of soap from another winter. "Push him," Rusk said, voice flat now. "Keep him on the yard." Hank cut a shot across Rusk's shoulder seam and saw cloth jump, a dark flower blooming under the slicker. Rusk rocked, clenched his jaw, and set himself back in the saddle like a man insulted. His rifle stayed level. Blood ran down his sleeve and made his glove shine. "That'll serve," Hank said, and breathed. South of them, a single shot slurred through wind, the kind a boy makes when he tests courage and finds enough. Then came another, closer. Toby Finch came shouldering out of the gray on Juniper, hat gone, hair iced to his skull, eyes big and wrong bright. He threw the gelding into the side draw and set the wingay. Henry to his shoulder with a jerk that was more will than training. His first shot dug dirt. The second rattled Pike's stirrup and made the man swear like a man steps on a live coal. "Get," Toby barked in a voice that cracked. "Get, you curs!" He threw a third and then a fourth, wild but loud, the kind of noise that makes men look the wrong way. Rusk snapped his head. "Cut that boy!" Mac swung the dogs and they lunged as one, pulling him off his seat, so he had to stand in the irons. Hank took the space the dogs opened and walked 2 shots, quick, into the packed snow at their feet. Flung slush stung hound eyes. Blue missed his step and wrenched his shoulder, yelped once, angry and surprised. "Hold the line!" Rusk tried to stand tall, but his left arm had gone soft. He changed hands and put the rifle into his right like it weighed 2 extra pounds of confession. Hank stepped down off the fence and gave himself to the yard. He crossed the open slow and square, daring their sights to find him, then broke left toward the rock pile where he'd set posts last fall. Snow there lay thin over mud. He wanted the mud. He wanted to be heavy and close to earth, to draw them where boots slip and horses hate the footing. Bullets talked at him and past him and into the boards. One found cloth and skin at his ribs, a hot rake that knocked his breath in half, and kept going. He put a hand to it and came away wet. The wet cooled quick. He kept moving. He felt the Spencer's stock slick up in his palm and tightened down. At the creek bend, reeds clicked their old song, two dry spears bumping in the wind. Ruth heard the firing climb and fall, and made herself smaller against the bank. She put her mouth to the blanket and breathed warm into Owen's dark and counted 10 and listened, 10 and listened, fighting the need to turn her face toward sound. Water shouldered her boot and then let it go. The cottonwoods were ribs against a blacker sky, close enough a person could name their shapes. Hank reached the rock pile and dropped to one knee. The mud took him a hand's width. He let it. He set the Spencer across the top stone and built his world to the size of a front sight. The sight walked to Mac's hat brim and tore it away, drew blood out of scalp and pride. Mac swore in a voice with straw in it and pulled the dogs back short, new cautious in his hands. Pike got patient and good. His next ball came in low and mean and found Hank's thigh where the coat didn't cover. It rang his bone like iron on a rail. Heat and cold fought for the same inch of him. He breathed through it and set another round where Pike's boot meant to be. The horse saved the man. It jumped light and took the sting instead. "Circle him," Rusk said, thinner now, voice riding pain. "He won't run." "He'll anchor, been anchored," Hank said, to himself or the ground. He slid his thumb across the wooden button in his pocket and felt each notch. He said the thing he'd said in the dark. "Easy, boy." It steadied the shake trying to start in his hands. Toby slid along the side hill, firing when he could see, ducking when the world turned to metal around him. A round found his stirrup leather and cut it. He pitched forward, smacked the drift, vanished to the waist, and came up blowing. Snow pasted to his mouth like flour. He braced the Henry across his knee and sent two more at Pike that did nothing but make the man hunch. "I'm here, Mr. Hank," he hollered, voice raw. "I ain't leavin'." "Live, then," Hank said under his breath. "Live, you fool boy." Rusk slid right, looking to take Hank's left side, and Hank let him, waited a half heartbeat, and sewed a shot through the slicker seam of that right shoulder, too. The rifle jumped in Rusk's hand and nearly went. He caught it with hurt and hate both, and made an ugly sound in his throat that wanted to be a word. "Enough," he spat. It was. The world closed in and got simple. Hank saw Mac set his jaw. He saw Pike lay his rifle true. No more left hand clever, just work. He saw where he'd bled into his own coat and how steam rose off it, white as horse breath. He saw his breath turn to ropes in the air. He saw the mud at his knee. It was the color of coffee boiled too long. He lifted the Spencer one more time. The stock felt like the rail of a porch he'd sanded 100 mornings. The sight settled. He put his last clean, certain round into the ground at Rusk's horse's toes. The animal checked and came back a step and took Rusk with it. That bought 3 heartbeats. He spent them passing the pack wider from the creek line without moving an inch. The bullet that found him then came from somewhere he hadn't given enough respect to. Pike's corner, low. It entered quiet, and then it took out a piece of strength you can't ask for back. Hank let the breath he held go and let his weight follow it. The mud took his knee, then his hip. The Spencer slid down the rock and into his palm like it wanted to stay. He kept it. He lay on his seat and watched his own steam climb into storm. Snow came curious and soft and stuck to his sleeve, to the welt of leather along the rifle's comb, to the gray in his beard. He set his palm to his pocket and found the wooden button, brought it out with fingers that felt too big and too cold. The O lay in his hand like a small brand from summer. He looked at it. He didn't say a word to it. He didn't have to. He closed his hand, and the button slipped from skin gone slick and dropped into the mud snow at his chest. It made no sound he could hear. Toby fired again and again, crying now and not knowing it. "Over here! Over here!" he yelled at the men who meant to be wolves and found themselves just men again in weather and noise. He dragged their eyes the way Hank had taught him. He did it right. Hank set the Spencer one last time, not to kill a thing, but to make a line. He put the muzzle toward the yard where a man would have to cross to take the back gate. He laid his hand over the stock. It was a touch a body makes on a headstone without meaning to. The rifle was warm under his palm, and then it wasn't. Rusk sat down hard in his saddle and held his bleeding arm to his belly. He said something to Mac that the wind took. The dogs panted white into the dark and pawed the crust. Not sure what praise was for, Pike eased his gun down, not from mercy, but because the work had gone out of the night. Hank watched the sky lean lighter by a thumb width. He felt the ground heavy and close. He thought of a creek under skin, of reeds clicking, of a tent low in cottonwoods, and coffee making a small, homely sound. He listened for a baby's fuss and heard only wind. He let that be enough. "That's far enough," he said, plain. It wasn't to Rusk. It wasn't to the dogs. It was to the part of himself that wanted to keep walking. He set his hand harder on the Spencer till the feeling left his fingers, and he lay quiet in the mud snow, while the storm covered the sharp places, one flake at a time. The cottonwoods showed first, black ribs sawn out of darker sky, and then a thin lift of color along the far hills, the way coals remember fire. Ruth followed the creek's mumble till the reeds stood and rattled. Her legs went to sticks under her, and the cold had found the gaps in her will, but the bundle under her chin breathed slow and sure. She put her mouth to wool. "We're near," she said into the dark that warmed with her breath. A rag of smoke hung where the bank curled. Old Ike's tent sat there like a patched thought, canvas-bellied with a little stove's pride. Traps hung from a pole and made a dull wind chime. Mink, rat, a coyote if a man knew his shapes. The flap was laced, but not tight. A light lived behind it, yellow as butter, mean as January will allow. Ruth touched the canvas. "Sir." The word cracked, a cough, a scrape of stool, the clink of a pot lid. "You bring news or lies?" The voice had gravel and tobacco in it. "Just breath," she said, "and a small one borrowing mine." The lace hissed through eyelets. The flap pulled back. Old Ike had a beard like a worn brush, and eyes the same color as the creek, under ice. He took them in as quick as a man reads weather. He didn't look past the blanket till he'd stepped them through, set the flap back, shouldered the tent against the wind like an old friend. "Put him here," he said, gentler than his face. He set a pan back on the stove, tallow popping soft as rain on tin. The heat came at her like a hand, open and sure. It stung where the cold had set hooks. Ruth unrolled a corner of wool, and he saw the small face, red in the right places, pale in the other, a mouth shaped like a seed. Ike's brows did a thing that amounted to a blessing. "All right," he told the boy, "you arrived." He held a tin cup toward Ruth. Coffee moved in it, black and stubborn. "Sip slow. Your heart runs too small right now." She did as told. The burn walked down her throat and sat like a stove brick in her chest. Tears came without the rest of the face joining in. She wiped them with the back of her wrist, like a worker who can't spare a hand. "There's men on the range," she said. "They'll circle back. I came by the water. A man showed me the seam. He—" "Which man?" Ike asked, though his eyes said he'd guessed. "Hank Mallory." Ike watched the stove door for a long second, the way a man watches something he's known was coming. Huh? He opened the door and laid another stick on the coals like laying a coin in a poor box. Mercy's a tough hide, he said. Winter'll soften it. He didn't look at her when he said it. He looked like he was saying it to the stove, or to somebody not in the room. Ruth wrapped the sheepskin closer round Owen's feet and let him take a breath that wasn't all hers. He told me not to stop and not to look back, she whispered. I looked once. Wasn't right. But I did. Men spend their whole noise on telling women how to look, Ike said, half a smile in the beard. You did the lookin' that saves. The other kind is just pride wind, shouldered the tent and made the poles complain. Distant somewhere, a gun spoke a last small word and was done. The sound came thin, this far north, and left no echo. Ike's eyes closed for one beat and then opened practical. You'll lay down some, he said. I'll sit the pipe and listen to the creek. She's honest. He studied the tent ropes. If they nose this way, they won't like what they smell. I ain't got manners for him from men who hunt babies. Rusk, Ruth said. Clay Rusk got himself a book and learned how to spell law with a match, Ike answered. He'll run out of pages when the thaw comes. Paper rots quick in spring. You rest. He put the pan off the hot plate and flashed a jackknife through a strip of salt pork, dropped the pieces to hiss. The tent filled with a smell that improved the world. Ruth set the bundle in the curve of her arm and let the coffee be heavy in her hand. She breathed and counted like Hank had told her and didn't hear boots, only creak and a small stove and the old man's pipe draw. The baby rooted once, found nothing, settled his mouth into wool, and decided sleep was better than argument. Owen, she said, trying the name in a decent place for the first time where no one could take it. Owen. Ike nodded like a thing had been made, square. He'll carry it fine. Time moved with the stove. It went slow and true. When the dark outside thinned to a gray that suggested color, the flap luffed. A shape blundered through, boy-sized, hatless, white to the ears with frost. Henry tucked up like a baby he'd rather not drop. Toby Finch found the pole with his shoulder and near took the tent down, then found his legs and grinned, ashamed and proud both. Ike, he asked the room, because the room was safer than a man might be. You're in it, Ike said. He hauled the boy down on a crate and peeled one glove off, then the other slow to spare skin. Tell it. Toby's teeth chattered around the words. Mr. Hank made 'em look at him. Dogs near had me, but he swallowed the rest as if it hurt the inside of his mouth. He told me to live, he said, a child's obedience in a man's tone. So I did. Ike put a tin cup in his hands, and the boy nearly cried at the heat. He drank and burned his tongue and didn't care. He looked at Ruth and the bundle and understood enough to hold his noise. He nodded small. Ma'am. Thank you, Ruth said. They didn't say for what. There wasn't one thing big enough. Morning came true. The cottonwoods were ablush where the sun thought about being brave. Wind lost some of its teeth. Far south, the storm held onto the flats and made the horizon dirty. No men came into the willows, no hounds told on the world. Ruth let a piece of herself melt she hadn't trusted to since sundown. What now, she asked, like a person would ask a map. Now you eat, and then you sleep, and then you listen, Ike said. Then you go on keeping him warm. After that, there's a widow's loft over by the depot. Needs mending work. Might be you know a needle. Might be I know a teamster rides quiet and minds his miles that can get you there without asking for your name twice. Spring will turn this creek to honest noise, and none of Clay's paper'll speak over it. He tamped his pipe with a thick thumb. The range ain't all bad. It just gets cold enough to show which pieces Ruth watched steam wander out of the coffee and make ghosts under the ridgepole. Mr. Mallory. The words came slow, like a man driving a wagon down a hill too slick to hurry. He had a button in his pocket with an O on it. He held it like prayer. Ike looked at the flap, at the daylight trying the seam. Then he wrote what needed writin'. He stood and reached for a wool square and tucked it higher under Owen's chin. A man gets one or two good letters to spend. Some spend 'em on their own names, some don't. They were quiet a while. Coffee went low. Pork went from hiss to settle. Toby's chin found his chest, and he slept like a boy who'd outrun a night. Ruth kept the bundle where the heat was and let her shoulders drop. Out on Hank Mallory's yard, snow slacked and showed the dark meat of mud where men had chopped it into a memory. The rock pile wore a thin cap like a poor man's hat. Beside it lay a Spencer with winter on its stock and a handprint in the grime that no weather would quite wash. A small, rough wooden button with an O cut bad and honest sat half sunk in slush. Grit filmed over it like skimmed milk. Wind went easier through the cottonwoods. It touched the little grave up the hill and did not take anything away. By the time the sun was a real thing, old Ike had the flap tied so it could watch the creek. Ruth dozed, sitting up, and woke with her cheek warm and a stripe from canvas on it. The baby snored once, one small ridiculous sound, and she laughed for the first time since the road began. It surprised her, it cleaned a corner. Ike poured her a finger more coffee, and not more. "You'll need your hands steady," he said. "World's liable to be kinder today than last night. Don't let it scare you," Ruth nodded. She looked toward the south where the storm hung and didn't move. "Thank you," she said, to the old man, to the tent, to the creek, to a yard not hers. "Don't spend thanks all at once," Ike said, mild. "You'll need some for spring." He poked the fire and it answered like a good dog. The tent held their heat and the wind thought better of its old tricks. The day walked in on quiet feet and stayed. Snow will fade, tracks won't. Out there in the cottonwoods, coffee still burbles and a boy named Owen sleeps through the thaw. Hank's yard is quieter now, but mercy hangs on like frost in shade. Slow to leave, honest when it does. If this tale's best with you, drop a 0 if you felt the cold. A 1 if you'd ride this trail again. Hit subscribe and hitch your saddle here. Next week we'll light another lantern and follow where the wind points.